What if you could live forever? No tricks, no catch, just endless existence stretching ahead. Would you take it? At first it sounds perfect, no fear of death, no final goodbyes, no rush. But have you really thought about what that means? We fear death because it's the great unknown, but it's also what gives life urgency. It forces us to act, to love, to take risks, to chase dreams. Every ticking second reminds us that time is slipping away, and yet we waste it anyway, convinced we have more. If that urgency disappeared, would anything still feel meaningful? The first problem with immortality is purpose. We thrive on limits. The knowledge that we won't be here forever makes us want to leave a mark. But if life were infinite, would anything matter? Would we still push ourselves? Would we still love as fiercely, knowing we had forever? Would we ever feel the need to start anything, knowing there was no end? Right now, people dream of traveling the world, mastering new skills, building great things. But that's because time is running out. If there were no final deadline, would we ever get around to doing anything? Maybe at first, but eventually, everything that could be done would be done. Every book read, every song learned, every adventure had. The world is vast, but it is finite. Even the universe has limits. What happens when there's nothing left to discover? When every experience is just a loop, repeating again and again? Would you still be living or just existing?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Then there's the question of pain. Would immortality mean an escape from suffering, or would it mean experiencing every possible kind of pain endlessly? Heartbreak, loss, failure, these things shape who we are, but if they kept piling up forever, would we still be the same person? Or would we be crushed under the weight of infinite grief and regret? And what about relationships? Love feels precious because it doesn't last forever. If we could never lose someone, would we still value them the same way? If no goodbye was permanent, would any moment still feel important? And what if you were the only one who never aged, never changed, never left? Watching everyone you love fade away while you stay the same, century after century, would you keep forming new connections, knowing they'd all be temporary? Or would you eventually stop caring at all? Even if you found a way to make it all bearable, there's still one last, unavoidable truth: the universe itself won't last forever. One day the sun will die, the stars will burn out, the galaxies will drift apart. The universe will grow cold and empty, and you, if you are truly immortal, will still be here, alone. No people, no light, no purpose, nothing left to do. Just silence, stretching on forever. Does life still matter when there's no one left to live it with? Or does it only mean something because it ends? Maybe the problem isn't just that life would go on forever. Maybe the real problem is what eternity would do to you. Right now, who you are is shaped by time. The way you think, the way you feel, the way you feel, the way you make choices, it all comes from the fact that your time is limited. The urgency to love, to create, to chase something bigger than yourself exists because, deep down, you know you won't always have the chance. But what happens when that pressure disappears? Would you still care about the things that make you who you are today? Maybe at first, but after 1,000 years? 100,000? When memories start to blur, when the weight of endless experiences makes everything feel like noise, when every moment starts to feel the same, would you even recognize yourself anymore? Most people assume immortality means staying the same forever, but that's impossible. Every experience changes you, every choice reshapes you. Over centuries, you wouldn't be the same person, you would be an entirely different being, shaped by endless years of memories, mistakes, and boredom? Would you still have the same values, the same dreams, or would you eventually stop caring altogether? Even now, people lose interest in things once they become too familiar. A song that once gave you chills becomes background noise after enough listens. A passion that once set you on fire can turn into routine. Imagine that happening with everything. If you've done it all, seen it all, felt it all, where do you go from there? Would anything excite you anymore? Would anything make you feel alive? Even if you could somehow keep finding new things to care about, there's another problem: how long before life itself becomes a prison? Bodies are not built to last forever. Even if science finds a way to keep you going, would you still want to exist if your mind became overwhelmed, your thoughts slowed, your memories piled up until the past outweighed the present? What if your body stayed young but your mind felt ancient, stretched thin under the weight of infinite years? Would you still feel human? Or would you become something else entirely, something detached from everything that once made life meaningful? And even if you avoided that fate, you can't escape the reality that nothing else in existence lasts forever. Stars die, planets decay, civilizations fall. Even if you were the last survivor of time itself, if everything else disappeared, would immortality still be worth it? Imagine floating in an empty universe, no sound, no life, just an endless, silent void stretching forever. Would that still be life? Or would it be a punishment? The idea of living forever sounds like a gift, but maybe what makes life beautiful is the fact that it ends. Maybe the only reason anything matters at all is because one day it will be gone. People say they want to live forever, but what they really want is more time to love, to learn, to experience everything they feel they've missed. They don't actually want an endless existence, they want the feeling of never running out of chances. But if you remove the ending, if you stretch life out infinitely, do those chances still feel meaningful? The value of anything comes from its limits. Money is valuable because it is scarce. Moments are special because they don't last. Even the best day of your life would lose its magic if you could relive it 1,000,000 times. That's the trap of immortality. It promises infinite joy, but in doing so, it strips joy of what makes it real. Think about the happiest memory you have. The rush, the excitement, the feeling that this moment was rare, something to hold on to. Now, imagine if you could repeat that memory every day forever. At first it would be bliss, but slowly the edges would blur. The thrill would fade. The magic would disappear. Eventually it would feel just like any other day, no different from the millions before it. People don't crave eternity, they crave the intensity that comes from knowing things won't last. That's why humans chase excitement, fall in love, take risks, because the alternative is stagnation, and stagnation is worse than death. If life had no end, no urgency, no ticking clock, would anyone truly live? And what happens when the people around you don't have forever? If you were the only immortal, time wouldn't just change you, it would break you. At first, you'd hold on to your loved ones, cherish them, fight for every second. But after watching them grow old and die over and over and over, something inside you would crack. You might try again, build new relationships, start over, but how many times can a heart endure loss before it stops feeling altogether? If everyone you love is temporary, how long before you stop letting yourself love? At some point, caring would become a liability, an endless cycle of attachment and grief. Maybe you wouldn't even notice the change. Maybe one day, after 1,000 years, you'd wake up and realize you haven't truly loved anything in centuries. Even if you found a way to endure the loneliness, even if you filled the endless years with distractions, the universe itself would still march toward its inevitable end. The stars would burn out. The planets would crumble. Everything would slow, stretch, fade. And you, if you are truly immortal, would be left behind, drifting through an empty cosmos, waiting for something new that will never come. At that point, you wouldn't be living, you would just be existing, a ghost in a dead universe. The desire to live forever comes from the fear of death, but maybe the real fear should be the opposite. Maybe the worst fate isn't dying. Maybe the worst fate is never being able to. Maybe the reason death feels terrifying is because we're wired to survive, to cling to life no matter what. But that instinct doesn't mean death is the enemy. It just means we are afraid of the unknown. If death were truly the worst thing that could happen, then why do people get tired of life even when they have years left? Why do some lose their sense of purpose long before their bodies fail? Why do people chase risks, throw themselves into danger, seek out the thrill of almost losing everything? It's because life isn't just about existing, it's about meaning, and meaning only exists where there are limits. A song is beautiful because it has an ending. A story is powerful because it doesn't go on forever. The best moments in life hit the hardest because we know we can't hold on to them forever. Think about a sunset. If you knew the sky would always stay that color, would you still rush outside to see it? If the best meal you ever had could be eaten endlessly, would it still feel special? If the person you loved would always be there, no matter what, would you still hold them a little tighter when they were close? The fact that things end is not a curse, it's the very reason we cherish them. People dream of eternity because they think it will give them more time to enjoy life. But life isn't just about stacking up experiences like points on a scoreboard. It's about feeling, and feelings only mean something when they are fleeting. The rush of excitement, the depth of love, the weight of sadness, they are only real because they are temporary. Take away that limit, and you take away what makes them matter, and maybe that's the real answer. Maybe we don't actually want to live forever. Maybe what we want is to live fully while we have the chance. Maybe the problem isn't that life is too short, but that we waste too much of it waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right time to start living the way we really want to. The fear of death shouldn't be a reason to chase immortality. It should be a reason to stop waiting, to stop putting off the things that matter, to stop acting like we have forever when we don't. Because if there's one thing worse than dying, it's reaching the end and realizing you never really lived. People chase immortality because they think more time will solve everything, but time isn't the problem. If it were, no one would waste years doing things they don't love, staying in places they don't belong, putting off happiness like it's something they'll get to later. The truth is, the fear of death doesn't come from not having enough time, it comes from the fear of not having used it well. No one lies on their deathbed wishing they had lived longer just to exist. They wish they had loved harder, risked more, cared less about things that didn't matter. They wish they had been braver, been kinder, been more present. They wish they hadn't spent so much time acting like life was something they could put on hold. That's why the dream of living forever is an illusion. It tricks people into thinking they need more years, when what they really need is to stop living like they have endless ones ahead of them. Even if immortality were possible, it wouldn't fix the real problem, because the problem isn't that life ends, it's that people are afraid to truly live. They settle. They stay comfortable. They wait for the right moment, the right person, the right opportunity, and they don't realize that the only thing standing between them and the life they want is their own hesitation. The idea of an ending is what makes everything real. It's what gives love its weight, what makes ambition burn, what turns ordinary moments into memories that stay with you forever. When people say they wish they had more time, what they really mean is they wish they had used it differently. And if that's the case, the answer isn't to wish for forever, it's to stop waiting, stop hesitating, stop assuming that tomorrow is guaranteed, because one day it won't be. If life were infinite, nothing would matter. But because it's not, every moment does. That's why people fight to hold on to things, why they chase dreams even when they're afraid, why they say words like "I love you" even when they don't know if they'll hear them back. It's why sunsets are beautiful and goodbyes hurt and laughter feels like magic, not because they last, but because they don't. The only way to make peace with the fact that life ends is to live in a way that makes it worth it. Not someday, not later, not when it's more convenient. Now. Because when the time comes, and it always does, the only thing that will matter is whether you can say, without hesitation, that you truly lived. People waste so much time being afraid of the wrong thing. They fear dying, but they don't fear wasting years doing nothing that matters. They fear running out of time, but they don't fear spending their days stuck in routines that drain them. They fear saying goodbye, but they don't fear never fully showing up for the people they love while they're still here. The fear of death has convinced people that the answer is more time, but it's never been about time. It's about presence. It's about depth. It's about waking up and realizing that life isn't something you eventually get around to. It's happening now, in this exact moment, whether you decide to truly live it or not. There is no right moment, no perfect condition, no guarantee that you'll have another chance to say what needs to be said, to take the risk, to make the change, to stop holding yourself back. The clock has always been ticking, but that's not a reason to be afraid, it's a reason to move. The people who live the fullest lives aren't the ones who wish for more time, they're the ones who take the time they have and make it count. They don't wait for things to feel safe. They don't sit around hoping for certainty. They don't waste years playing it small because they're afraid of failing or being judged or stepping outside of what's expected. They know that nothing is guaranteed, that the only real mistake is thinking there's always more time. If living forever would make life meaningless, then living fully is what gives it meaning. Not in some distant future, not after all the conditions feel perfect, but right now. No more waiting, no more delaying joy, no more wasting days on things that don't matter. Because in the end, the only thing worse than dying is looking back and realizing you were never really alive. People dream of eternity because they think it will free them, but real freedom isn't endless time, it's knowing that time runs out. When nothing is guaranteed, when every moment is a choice, when every goodbye could be the last, that's when life becomes real. That's when love becomes urgent, when risks feel necessary, when the ordinary becomes extraordinary just because you were there to witness it. The tragedy isn't that life ends, the tragedy is wasting it while you have it. People act like they have forever to chase what they want, to fix what's broken, to become who they are meant to be, but then years pass, and they're still waiting, still hesitating, still telling themselves that someday they'll start living for real. But someday is a lie. There is only now. There is no perfect time to say what you need to say, no perfect moment to take the leap, no certainty that waiting will make anything easier. Life doesn't care about your plans, it moves with or without you. The people who live the fullest lives aren't the ones who had the most time, but the ones who weren't afraid to use it. They failed, they risked, they lost, but they lived, fully and without holding back, because they understood that the cost of safety is regret. They didn't need forever, they just needed now, and they didn't waste it. If the fear of death keeps you from living, you've already lost. The goal was never to stretch life out endlessly, it was to make the years you have so full that you wouldn't trade them for 1,000 more. It was to love so deeply, to chase so boldly, to feel so completely that even if it all ended tomorrow, you could look back and say this was enough. Maybe immortality was never the answer. Maybe the real question isn't whether you want to live forever. Maybe the real question is what you're doing with the life you already have. People talk about life like it's something that happens later, like one day everything will line up just right, and then they'll finally start living the way they always meant to. But life isn't waiting. It's happening right now, in every decision, in every missed chance, in every moment that slips by while you tell yourself you'll get to it eventually. There's this illusion that if you had more time, you'd finally be fearless, finally take the risks, finally stop playing small. But time isn't the problem. People don't hold back because they don't have enough time. They hold back because they're scared of failing, scared of what people will think, scared of getting it wrong. But all that fear leads to the same place, a life filled with regrets, not because it ended too soon, but because it was never really lived at all. There is no guarantee that you'll wake up tomorrow. No guarantee that the people you love will always be there. No guarantee that later will come. But instead of using that as fuel, most people ignore it, wasting days on things that drain them, staying in places they've outgrown, numbing themselves with distractions instead of doing what actually makes them feel alive. They keep putting their happiness on hold, waiting for some magical sign that it's time, as if life is going to stop everything and hand them permission. But there is no permission. No one is coming to tell you when it's time to start living fully. That choice is yours, and it always has been. The problem was never time. It was never about needing more years. It was always about what you were willing to do with the ones you had. The people who get to the end with no regrets aren't the ones who lived the longest. They're the ones who weren't afraid to live at all. They let themselves care, let themselves love, let themselves take the risks that scared them, because they understood that nothing is promised. If you wait too long to live, you'll run out of chances. If you keep acting like you have forever, you'll wake up one day and realize you don't. The only way to have a life you're proud of is to stop waiting for it to start. People always think they have more time until they don't. They tell themselves they'll chase that dream later, fix that relationship later, say the words that matter later. But later turns into years, and years turn into a lifetime, and suddenly they're looking back wondering where it all went. It's easy to believe that there's always more time, that there will always be another chance, another opportunity, another tomorrow. But that's the greatest lie people tell themselves, the lie that keeps them stuck, keeps them waiting, keeps them living in a way that feels safe, but never truly alive. There's no countdown, no warning, no moment where life pauses and tells you this is it. This is the time to stop holding back. There's just now and what you choose to do with it. Regret doesn't come from failing, from making mistakes, from risking something and losing. Regret comes from all the things you were too afraid to try. It comes from the dreams you left behind because you thought they were too big, from the words you never spoke because you assumed you'd have another chance, from the way you settled for a life that felt comfortable instead of one that set your soul on fire. People don't look back and wish they had played it safer. They look back and wish they had been braver, wish they had loved harder, wish they had cared less about what others thought and more about what actually made them feel alive. One day, all of this will be gone. Every moment, every chance, every person you love. And that's not something to fear, that's something to use. That's the reason to stop waiting, to stop wasting days on things that don't matter, to stop telling yourself you'll live the way you want to later. Later isn't real. Someday is a lie. If you don't do it now, you might never do it at all. And when the end comes, and it always does, the only thing that will matter is whether you can look back and say you actually lived. People don't realize how much of life they waste until it's almost gone. They act like they're saving time, like holding back, staying comfortable, and avoiding risks is some kind of strategy to extend their years, but all they're doing is losing them differently. They trade excitement for routine, passion for security, adventure for what feels safe, and they don't even notice it happening. They sit in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, places that don't inspire them, and they tell themselves it's fine, that this is just how life is, that one day they'll change things. But one day is never now, and before they know it, they've spent decades living the same year over and over, mistaking survival for existence. Time isn't running out because life is short, it's running out because they don't use it. They don't fight for what they really want. They don't chase the things that make their hearts race. They don't love without fear. They wait for signs, for certainty, for the right moment. But the right moment doesn't exist. It never has. There's only now and what they do with it. Nobody ever regrets the risks they took, the love they gave, the chances they took even when they were afraid. They regret the things they let slip through their fingers, the people they never told how much they mattered, the dreams they pushed aside because they were too scared to fail. They regret the days they wasted being too cautious, too hesitant, too convinced that later would come. But later always arrives too late. Life doesn't slow down for anyone. It doesn't pause to let you catch up. It doesn't give you second chances just because you waited too long. The people who live fully aren't the ones who had the most time, they're the ones who refused to waste it. They weren't fearless, they weren't fearless, they weren't always ready, but they moved anyway. They said yes before they felt prepared, they jumped before they had all the answers, they loved without knowing what would happen. And because of that, they didn't just exist, they lived. The biggest mistake anyone can make is thinking they have time to waste. That they can put off joy, put off love, put off the things that truly matter because there will always be another day. But there won't. One day it all stops. The question isn't whether life ends, that part is guaranteed. The question is whether, when it does, you'll be able to say that it was enough, that you used it, that you didn't hold back, that you didn't play small, that you didn't wait for permission to live the way you wanted. Because in the end, the only thing worse than running out of time is realizing you never really used the time you had. People waste so much time waiting for life to feel right, for things to line up, for the fear to go away before they take the first step. They convince themselves that there will be a perfect moment when everything makes sense, when the risks don't seem so terrifying, when the path ahead is clear. But that moment never comes, and they don't realize it until they've already let too much slip away. Every second spent waiting is a second lost. Every chance ignored, every opportunity left behind, every love unspoken, it all adds up, until suddenly they look back and wonder how they got here, how they let so much time pass without truly living. They think they'll have more time, but time isn't something you own, it's something that moves whether you do or not. And while they're standing still, afraid to fail, afraid to make the wrong move, afraid of what people might say, life doesn't wait. The years don't pause. And the people who could have changed everything, the ones they loved, the ones they should have held on to keep moving forward, with or without them. Nobody ever wakes up and decides to waste their life. But that's what happens when they let fear dictate their choices. They trade adventure for comfort, passion for security, dreams for what's practical. They convince themselves it's temporary, that they'll eventually get back to the things they really want, but they don't. The longer they wait, the harder it becomes to break free. They settle into routines, into habits, into lives that don't excite them, and then they pretend that's enough. They learn to be okay with mediocrity because mediocrity is predictable and the unknown is terrifying. They convince themselves that their dreams were unrealistic, that the love they wanted was impossible, that the risks weren't worth it. But deep down, they know the truth. They know they were meant for more. They know they had chances and they let them pass. And eventually, the weight of everything they didn't do becomes heavier than the fear that held them back in the first place. By the time they realize what they've lost, it's too late to get it back. Time doesn't give second chances. The people they didn't fight for have moved on. The dreams they ignored have withered. The person they could have been is just a memory of what might have been. And the worst part is that it wasn't some big, dramatic event that took it all away. It was hesitation, little by little, over years. It was every moment they stayed silent when they should have spoken, every day they chose comfort over change, every time they said tomorrow, when they should have said now. That's how people lose their lives, not all at once, but piece by piece, until there's nothing left but regret. And the cruelest part is that they never had to live that way. It was always a choice. It was always in their hands. The fear was never the real enemy. The real enemy was waiting.